How y'all doing?
Not too
Doing
shabby.
great.
I am doing well. Would you mind, for the simple-minded in chat, reminding everyone who you are?
Yeah. I'm Kim. I am the engagement director for Progressive Victory. Um, Emma.
Hi, I am Emma Devro. I'm the community director here at PV. Last we spoke, yourself in chat, I was in Georgia on the ground canvassing. So it's nice to be here and nice to get to chat with you and hear some questions from our members.
In Georgia. What's
Yeah.
happening over there in Georgia?
Well, it was Warnock.
Oh my goodness, that's right. It has been that long since we've
Yeah.
last talked to each other, hasn't it?
Yeah. I'm a little more camera shy, so I don't come on as often. But yeah, here I am.
Well, that's okay. We'll rectify that with some fine cueing and aying today.
Oh, and also, I use she, her pronouns. Cam uses they, them pronouns.
I knew that.
And now chat knows that.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm
We got
sure
a
Chow
bunch of
is
people.
screaming. Yeah, I'm sure Chow is screaming for pronouns because they always are.
Oh, sure. We got a bunch of people waiting, huh?
yes, we have the lovely community members here, and we are going to be prioritizing people who helped us out in the midterms, who secured all those progressive victories. So there are perks to volunteering. All you chatters should learn from that. Uh, uh, Emma's going to start us off here with the first question.
Yeah, so Diana asks, my trans fiance and I have kept our passports up to date just in case. Are you following your own advice? Are you ready to flee the country should things just continue to get worse?
Yeah, well, passports stay renewed for 10 years, so I won't need to take any active effort to follow my own advice for a while. I'm set. But yes, as time goes on, I'll continue that. Things are looking kind of rough right now. I do think there are some rays of hope on the horizon. Sincerely, I do think there's like a reasonable possibility that we get increasingly good news with time in terms of the GOP overstepping and sort of failing to capture the interest they need. And maybe the alert level, the DEFCON level, will come down with time.
Mm,
Not yet, though.
Sometimes it's darkest before the light.
For sure. There is definitely still time. Our next question comes to us from Ronald, who is going to ask that question himself.
Hey, so my question is, could you elaborate on what it means to be a progressive? Does progressivism mean no iPhone? Does believing in progressive politics obligate someone to act in a way that results in outcomes that lead to progressivism? To what extent can we expect someone to act for progressive change? I think I have a good general idea on this already, and I think we agree by majority. However, I would like to hear you elaborate to your audience on what this is all for, and can you also apologize for not giving out cheese wheels?
Yeah, we're banking the cheese wheel bank for sure. The interest is accumulating. I think at the end of the day, I think progressivism fundamentally is about freedom, and it's about non-essentialism. I think that at its root, progressivism is about understanding that fundamentally we're all basically the same. There are some differences between us, but for the most part, we want to live our lives with the right to handle ourselves however we like, as long as we're not hurting other people. And in order to do that, you need to prioritize freedom. You need to prioritize the ability to see past people's surface values and not make intuitive ascriptions to their character based on what you see. And this is why, I don't like the political chart, the compass, right, with the auth left, auth right,
Mm.
uh, lib left, live right. It's because I don't really think auth left is a thing, and I think that historically that has been the case. Um, Countries or societies which are highly authoritarian are overwhelmingly highly reactionary as well. I don't know how you could ideologically um, parse an obsession with state control or with an adherence to social norms and tradition while also allowing for a free range of personal expression when it comes to gender identity or whatever else.
For people of your audience, like how can they get involved, and like to what extent is someone obligated to get involved? Like for what I believe, if you have the time, it's good if you get involved. But at the end of the day, like it'll cause like unnecessary infighting to be like, oh, you have to do X amount, you have to like give away all your money to charity. But at the same time, like if you do have the ability, why not like try and help out, you know?
Yeah, I think it's good to try your best. I think that's a ubiquitous, belief. I think you could apply that pretty much everywhere in life. Obligations are a bad way to get people to engage in good behavior. Usually, people will do things that align with strong values or convenience. And as callous as it may be to say, right? Like we pass by homeless people walking down the street all the time, don't we? We often have cash in our pocket. If we gave cash to every homeless person, maybe we'd be broke. But have we done it to everyone we've ever seen? Probably not. But it's good to encourage. It's good to say, we can't always be perfect and we can't always do what might theoretically be our best, but it's good to make an effort. And the best way to maximize good engagement under those circumstances, often, I think, is to sell them on the appeal, on the convenience. That's why when I talk about canvassing so much, I talk about accurately, by the way, I don't need to lie. I talk about how socially engaging it can be, how much fun it can be. I mean, literally right before I started talking right here, here's a donation that I got. Velabel, thanks the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. First time canvassing with folks and it felt great. That's just why I just saw that right before I got in. I get this all the time. I'll reread that dono later and thank you properly, of course. I get this all the time. People have fun. There was a phone banking dono that came in that I read right before I got on here. People enjoy doing this stuff because they feel useful, they feel engaged, they get social opportunities, they get down the line, maybe even career opportunities. This stuff can branch out quite a lot depending on how things play out. It is deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Ronald. All right, up next, we have Apricot with a question.
My question was, what's the best way you can make sure that people with a lot of money don't have like outsized influence on politics, or like what's the best way to keep money out of politics?
Wow, that's a tough one. Well, I mean, the long-term goal would be, total decommodification or worker cooperative-based society. But that's obviously kind of like answering the question with, well, what if we just fixed everything? I think there are a couple of like obvious things we could do right off the bat, like Citizens United stuff. We need total transparency when it comes to where money is being found in politics, and also limits to it. The more we put a stranglehold on where money is allowed to come from in many of these political races, I think, the better and healthier our democracy will be. The point of a democracy, after all, is that, especially when it comes to voting in a candidate, everyone gets an equal say. If you have a system where a very small group of people have an enormously disproportionate effect, it's kind of difficult to call that a democracy. At the very least, it's closer to an oligarchy. And right now, it is, of course, the capitalists, the people with the money who have a ridiculous amount of influence because their money sustains these political parties, and that means the political parties have to cater to them. Transparency is step 1. Limitations on what can be donated is step 2. I also think that better funding the IRS and other agencies that sort of regulate and manage the flow of money would be pretty good, because a lot of crimes are being committed right now. Our agencies either just don't have the money, the manpower, or the, let's say, initiative to go after the people that are committing these crimes. So at the moment, unfortunately, a lot of it is like constitutional regulatory stuff. But the further along we go, I think the more amenable people will be to systemic solutions to these issues.
All right, up next, we have a question from Andrew, who asks, do you think that lefty streamers and content creators with relatively big platforms have an obligation to try and get their audiences to engage in activism?
When you use terms like obligations, it sounds great when we're talking like internet philosophy. When it comes to actually motivating people and organizing them, terrible idea. People aren't like, people's obligations, like an obligation is a weighty thing, a responsibility is a weighty thing, and they're set not by some abstract calculation of what a person owes or is due, but rather by real moving forces in their life, emotional and material ones. So when you try to invoke that, maybe in some people you successfully instill in them a real, like, yes, I have an obligation to do this thing, to sacrifice my time for this cause. But for many other people, you alienate them. Many other people. And this is why volunteer orgs around the world instead rely on positive language. You can benefit from volunteering. Talk to people, meet new people, social opportunities, make a difference. You sell them on the positives. It's always a honey and vinegar situation when it comes to stuff like this, because the God's honest truth is you're not going to be able to find an obligation threshold. As utilitarianism doesn't really have a strong line between what is obligatory and what is supererogatory. That is to say, what is good to do but not necessary. I don't think it even has an answer. I mean, I'm sure some people say it does, but from what I've read, I have never been convinced. What could you say an obligation is, right? Like, certainly everyone could choose to donate all their money and then go and live like a monk and, be as optimally good as possible. But would you then denounce people for not doing that because they're not meeting an obligation? These questions are unanswerable, I think, and I think they're fully unproductive when trying to get people to do good things. You want to appeal to values they already have, to sell it to them, to make it their interest as well as yours. And if you run forward with that, I think you can do a lot of good. And I think overwhelmingly that is that is the effective strategy. Not to mention, then you get people arguing over whether or not somebody's doing enough. Like, I don't know if Sam Cedar's ever done any canvassing, but like if I went on the show and I was like, you've been doing political commentary for decades, I haven't seen you. It's like, well, what are we accomplishing? Nothing
Yeah.
except I get to feel like I'm doing something. I'm not, but I get to feel like it.
Fair. Our next question comes to us from Amy. Amy says, any advice on how to avoid burnout from the political turmoil we're currently going through in this nation?
Yeah, you have to recognize when you're experiencing burnout or getting like early signs of it, and then you have to respect it and just disengage. Obviously, if you have projects you're working on or like you're doing something right then, maybe you have to tough it through. But at the very least, like understanding your limits as a human is very, very important. We're not machines. We are subject to that massive variance in our performance based on a number of emotional factors. There are no humans who can operate without these without these limitations. The closest thing that we really have are like very heavy amphetamines or adrenaline, but those are not, for different reasons, those aren't really sustainable long term and maybe not even advisable at all as solutions to burnout. In reality, like doing anything meaningful, even if it's something that brings you a lot of joy, requires a lot of work. And that work sometimes puts you up in contact with stuff that makes you unhappy. And you will be better off in the long run if you learn when that abrasion is worsening your mental health, taking a break, and then returning to it when you feel better than you will if you try to power through it. Like the average gain in the long run will be better. We see this right now with the experiments with 4-day work weeks, where firms that have done 4-day work weeks are actually getting higher levels of productivity because people aren't like miserable to be there, which means they're getting a lot more done during the 4 days they are there than they were previously during the 5. So be respectful of your feelings. Don't feel bad for taking a break because everyone needs to. And never be cowed by the image of people in positions of superiority over you who seem as though they never need to take a break, because they do too. They just hide them from you. All of the hardworking contemporaries you've ever had have taken their breaks. And those who never have, who truly, genuinely never did, are probably not doing that well. We need our rest.
Absolutely. And here we have with us James.
So I am the organizing lead for Massachusetts, and I had a quick question regarding a recent thing that's kind of been scary in the online left, and that is the recent influx of Tankies being very outspoken and prominent. How do you think is the best way to combat that?
I don't think it's necessarily been recent. I think a lot of them have gotten more vocal because of the Ukraine war. But they were pretty vocal back before with the Bernie or Bust stuff, and they've always had a pretty disproportionate influence on a lot of online discussion. All the Reddit mods are Tankies. It's really weird. So you have to understand that there's like an ideological overlap here. A lot of these people who seem to be Tankies really are just anti-American. And there's like an ideological synchronicity there where they can go like, well, the real reason I dislike America is because of hegemon, geopolitic, proletariat. But in reality, like they don't care about those things. They just like countries that aren't America. A lot of this is also like young people, especially young political radicals, of which there are more every year, are innately contrarian and they have little experience with the real world, which means that they're desperate to not be like their parents. They are very quick to fall for like appeals or calls to action that would make them a dissonant or a rebel or like a provocateur. And that's why so much of say like lefty TikTok is Tanky oriented. I wouldn't feel despair over it. It does suck. I'm not going to deny that. It does suck that like that's such an easy pit to fall into. The thing that I would focus most on is a rigorous adherence to principles which are unmistakably leftist, unmistakably progressive, And when they don't appear to support those principles, you just callously sort of disregard their revisionism, right? So if you're pro worker control, if you're pro proletariat, you're pro this, you're progressive, da 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 da, you stand by that, and don't bother like directly engaging with them or challenging them, because they're what? They're reactionaries, they're liberals, they're fascists, they're outside of your space. Allow them to justify to you the legitimacy of their positions, because as long as they're the one trying to convince you, they're at a massive disadvantage, because it means they have to make appeals that don't rely entirely on their like insane in-group dogma, like they have to reach out to you, which is why you see all this incredibly confident, like, yes, Russia is trying to liberate the Russian ethnic people from the Donbass or blah blah. But then, like, if you actually talk to a pro-Russian Ukraine war type person directly, they scale that way back. They're like, well, don't you think like what happened with Yanukovych in 2014 was like a little bit weird? Because they know, like, once they're no longer in their own echo chamber, they can no longer rely on these just taken for dogma. So just don't worry too much about it. Be confident in your positions, and defend them if challenged. You'll make the space around you better.
Thank you so much.
You have a wonderful day.
Up next, we have Dylan.
Yeah, hello. I was wondering, we're all here in Progressive Victory, and a big mission that we've talked about is moving officials to the left, even if they're not ones that we directly elected. So we didn't have a hand in it, but we're trying to lobby them, we're trying to move them on stuff. I guess I wanted to ask from a left-wing point of view, because liberals and conservatives have models and more money than we could dream of to do this already. What does that look like for us? And a perfect example right now might be, for example, in Nebraska, there's a senator named Megan Hunt who's been on the warpath recently, standing up for transgender people, basically stopping everything going on in the Nebraska Senate until they drop a piece of anti-trans legislation. And so for people that already agree with us, if we want to move them, or for like nominal liberals that we want to move to be more left-wing, what does it look like for someone on the progressive left, someone in Progressive Victory, or any similar organization to sort of play that game and move people without just kicking them out of office?
So I'm speculating here because, I haven't done this work myself. I've talked to people who have, so I'm kind of interpolating their results. But it really depends on how sincere the politician is, I think. Some politicians are, maybe not many at the federal level especially, but some politicians are motivated sincerely by values that they hold. They will take unpopular positions if they think they're morally right. They will try to get what they think is right done. Sometimes they'll make sacrifices, but for the most part, they care about what they believe in. And some people are purely like, just get me reelected. Party hacks, partisan hacks. And I can't make a guess as to how much of either or one specific person is. But I think when you're talking to them, you're not going to move the latter group, the hack, with anything other than like polling data and a structured argument on the popularity of some subjects. And that's, that's math to them, right? When it comes to the values stuff, though, I think the main thing that Democrats especially need to get on board with is the fact that when it comes to politics, you only get a tiny fraction of what you want to do done, especially at the state level. And as long as that's the case, you need to direct your energy and attention towards the subjects of greatest import, the subjects of greatest focus. And the Republicans, as unethical and maybe ill-advised as their hyperfixation on trans people is, it is a fixation. It is a national strategy, isn't it? It represents coordination across all levels of the Republican constituency, from the federal level all the way down to the voters, and alignment on a subject. And I think selling Democrat politicians on that would be a good idea, not on the Republican side of the issue, but on the idea of directing their attention towards the front of the issue. You can't just ignore this trans stuff, because this trans stuff isn't just an esoteric, sidelined, minor social issue. It might have been 20 years ago, I'll admit. The subject at that time might have been like a kind of, like niche, marginal one, but right now it's the forefront of a massive political push. And if you want to be relevant and if you want to get stuff done, you have to focus on those axes where you can get people's attention. And I think a lot of people, especially the Democrats, they're not malicious. They're just kind of out of touch. A lot of them are just sort of old, and they remember Bill Clinton, and they remember, they've been in power for a while, many of them, and they hear about all this trans stuff, and to them it just comes across as a hysterical fad Republicans are pushing. But it's not. It's meaningful, and it needs to be responded to in kind.
All right, much appreciated. Thanks so much for your time. Hope you are doing well.
Oh, well, likewise. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Okay, so on that note, actually, we have a question from Jacob, who asks, how do I advocate for radical progressive action in my family/community of liberals? How can we most effectively convince liberals to take the fascist threat seriously?
Well, I would say we have to look to historical parallels, but like Ron DeSantis right now is threatening to arrest teachers for not adhering to a whitelist of accepted content in schools, which cannot include any mention of queer people. So I feel like it's not even a matter of looking at history. You can just point at that, but it's about how you sell it too. There are so many signs that what is going on is distinct, is special. It's not the way things used to be. I think drawing a historical parallel can still be valuable if you can try to build a case that there is this long-standing resentment on the part of the Republicans about the social battles they lost like 60, 70 years ago. The Civil Rights Act, like all those conservatives back then, like MLK died an unpopular man. All those conservatives back then, all those Southerners, they voted in Democrats at the time, many of them. But if you take a look at these constituencies, where they are, what they supported, how did the individual politicians move? Man, that didn't go away overnight. And there's been this building resentment, I think, that's been coded and underlaid. You can talk about the Southern strategy with Nixon, but it has remained. And right now we're seeing all of this rise to the top. Go to Twitter right now. Just browse the For You page, which has been trashed by Elon's algorithm. What are you going to see? Well, leaving aside all the attacks on trans people, there are a lot of white nationalists on there. And they're not getting small numbers in their retweets and likes either. There are a lot of people just flat out just posted videos of black people getting into fights, as though I didn't grow up seeing a million videos of white Southerners getting into fights, Hicks or hillbillies or whatever. But no, it's always black people. And they're saying, these people are animals. We need to build a nation without them, da-da-da-da-da. But that ain't nothing. There are Republicans in the Senate and the House right now who have expressed pretty overtly white nationalist sentiments. If you get them on this narrative, I think they can understand Republicans, not after January 6th, man. Republicans aren't vying for an argument over which direction to take the country in. They don't want an argument. They just want to take the country in a direction. They'll do it by force if they need to, and the direction they want to take it is pretty as much of an objectively bad direction as you can get from a moral anti-realist. We're talking bad stuff. But you don't want to come across hysterical. Be matter of fact about it. Be conscious of what they consider to be a big problem, even if you think their priorities are out of order. And over time, I think you can make this case fairly to a lot of liberals.
I'd agree. Project confidence. Next up, we have a question from Miguel, who I know is a combat engineer stationed in South Korea.
Oh.
And he wants to ask, do you encourage someone in the armed forces to do volunteer work like phone banking and canvassing, or should I remain nonpartisan?
Wow. I am of course speaking with all the confidence and knowledge of a civilian over here. But personally, I think that an active expression of left-wing politics in the military is vital at the moment. I don't want to get, fatalistic or anything. I hope the military doesn't get directly involved in U.S. politics in the future. But I mean, even with, say, like General Milley, it's pretty clear that at the very least, the political leanings of the Pentagon are under scrutiny by a lot of people. Maybe because the right is aware of the fact that they kind of need the Pentagon's support in order to get some potential plans in the future done. Hopefully not. I think it would be good. Obviously, if you feel it would compromise your safety in any way, I don't think you should. But hey, it'll keep you occupied when you're on base.
Oh, wow. We have our very own Jay up next.
Jay.
What can orgs like PV do to encourage more people to help during election off seasons like the one we're in right now?
Yeah, I imagine this is like a ubiquitous volunteering problem. Getting people to like consistently engage, even during the quote unquote off season, that's really tough. You can build social networks to keep people hooked,
Mhm.
for a time. But I think that there is kind of a diminishing return there. I think what matters most actually is to keep a kind of an escalating threat level or degrees of urgency that you're consistent on. Or to put it another way, I think it's okay to admit that you're in an off season. There's always work to be done, sure. But I've noticed this when it comes to fundraising. Like if I wanted to do a fundraiser stream, people are most motivated when they have a clear understanding of the extent to which they feel they should really care about the thing that you're saying they should care about at that moment. And if you're saying 24/7, this is really important, this is really important, this is really important, this is really important. Are you lying? No, it's all really important. But there should be a reserve option, a little red button under the desk that you can hit when you're going, okay, li- okay, it's all important, but right now, we really need to get people out there. And
The
because
oh
then,
shit button.
yeah, the oh shit button, because I think that gives people an idea, because there are a lot of people on the back ends who will only tune in for what they consider to be the most important stuff, the emergency
Yeah.
moment, the national stuff. And if they hear emergency, emergency, emergency 24/7, they think like, okay, all right. And they kind of tune out because that's what humans do. We have to choose what we prioritize and we have to respond accordingly. But if there's that extra red button, the red alert, you give them the signal that it's their time to care again. And I think an appropriate proportioning of that's probably the best way to handle things. I've seen a lot of volunteer orgs burn out. PV's been going far longer than a lot of the orgs that I saw like live and die during my time doing incarceration and homeless advocacy in Humboldt. Like the stuff that I saw there, because it's actually quite unintuitive and quite difficult to manage people's long-term volunteering work. So I think we're on a really good track personally.
We have Piper up next.
So my question is basically just, I recently came over to a more progressive, well, a more liberal state for university. I plan to move here permanently. I'm from Georgia originally. And my question is just, do you think in the event of a Trump or DeSantis victory in 24 or a Republican majority in the House and Senate in 24, are you confident in a blue state's ability to protect trans people from any sort of legislative onslaught they might levy?
Confidence is a strong word. I don't think that the Republicans have the ability or the support necessary to do any kind of like military crackdown on blue states if they win and the blue states pass laws they don't like. I think that what might happen if they get total control of the federal government is they might try to sort of legislate their way through this. Like they might try to defederalize to the extent that they deny blue states the ability to pass their own laws in this sense. But I think that's a very time-consuming process. And what's more, the judges that would run through would not all be red. I mean, even if the Supreme Court is still red at that point, which it probably will be, that doesn't mean that every circuit court judge or every like state judge or like state Supreme Courts or anything like that. Like we're talking long stretches of time with no guarantee for results. Now, if there is some kind of military crackdown, obviously we're fucked. But I don't think that's the most likely outcome. What I think is going to happen if they get a victory is that they are going to very performatively do a burst of bad things, and then it will slow down tremendously because their primary focus in office will be the same that all politicians have, which is to appease their corporate benefactors. Going after trans people doesn't actually do that, and I think that they might be slowed down a little bit because it's a matter of like cashing the checks you've written. They can talk up a big game being Hitler 2.0, but once they're actually in the big seat, they're responsible for maintaining the, continuous GDP growth for the benefit of all them wealthy fucks who funded them on the way over. If they don't do that, then like that, there goes their support, the meaningful support. So will blue states offer protection? I think they offer time. And that's meaningful because I don't think the country will weigh continuously in favor of Republicans' behavior if they act that way after taking power.
Gotcha. Well, that honestly, instills me with a lot more hopefulness. So I appreciate that.
All right, we have a question from Sam who asks, how can we spark engagement from apolitical people?
Well, you have to reach people where they're motivated. You have to reach people where, like, what gets them out of bed, right? Apolitical people, kind of by definition, are fucking insane. I mean, have you seen look like right off the bat? So with that in mind, I feel like it's a matter of understanding what their particular neurosis is, and in many cases, I think it's actually burnout. I think a lot of independent people are people who either used to care and now don't because no change came about, or they were taught not to care. I see this a lot, for example, a lot of conversations that I've had, for example, growing up in Los Angeles with apolitical black people. Being apolitical when you're black in America is, I'm just going to say it, a stupid fucking decision. But a lot of them weren't apolitical because they didn't care about racism. They cared a lot. They just didn't think that there was any chance of anything good happening for them. They thought it was a waste of time and effort. World's unfair, life's unfair, do your best while you can. You're going to die one day. Don't waste your time trying to change things in a system that isn't susceptible to change. Now, they were wrong. Their approach, their attitude there is empirically incorrect. It's provably wrong, but that's how they feel. So how do you knock people out of a state like that if that's how they feel? Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of it really is interpersonal, and a lot of it's also going to rely on emotional appeals. Logical appeals, if they were the name of the game here, then they would already be political, I think, most of them. Stuff that matters to them, stuff that they care about. Parents tend to be really sensitive about their children for good reason. This is why the GOP is fixating so much about child gender ideology, CRT, blah, blah. Because, arguing that a parent's child is under threat from something dangerous is kind of like an emotional shortcut to their support. And you can do that. I mean, we can go that route too. We wouldn't be wrong to at all, not even remotely. I think it's a reasonable thing to consider at the very least. You just have to work to understand what it is that would get them to care about something. There's no broad answer for that.
Let's say hi to Jay.
What do you recommend with regards to staying informed, taking action with local, national politics, like regularly, while still also keeping up with your life responsibilities? I don't know if you have any tips for balancing things like retail work, if interpersonal relationships with friends and family, hobbies, and the like, as well as take the action to discuss them with people in your life who oftentimes don't agree with your perspective. I've had to, I feel a little two-faced oftentimes because I have to, in different settings with different people, it feels like I'm interacting with people who I might have close family who might be very reactionary, and I have to, keep in mind all of that rabbit hole of things, as well as people who might be willing to believe what we do, but might also lack the the drive or the interpersonal relations that we're fond of seeing in communities like this. I don't know if that's too broad a question for you.
It ain't too broad at all, actually. No, look, the Black Panther Party discouraged marriage between its members. The reason for that was they found that when people marry and pair off, they care less about politics. Being a political firebrand is a lot easier when you're, 20 years old and you've got a gun and no one in the world, cares about you, and you're just out there doing your best. Once you marry someone, you really want them to live, and you really want to live for them, and it makes you a much worse revolutionary. And you know what happened to the Black Panther Party? You're right, it was rhetorical, but I waited an uncomfortably long time. They broke apart.
So I didn't want to just.
Yes, that's a no.
They broke apart. They got, well, I'll admit, the FBI fucked them up, sure. But the Black Panther Party failed to produce anywhere near as long-standing or as effective or as community-oriented of a movement as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s did. And that wasn't just because they were radical. And of course, the Black Panther Party did a lot of incredible stuff, but it faded away. And that's because I think there are political consequences to essentially encouraging life devotion from your members. That degree of constant committal. This is your life. You show up here after you're done with work. This is what you do. We dictate your standards. This is what you are. I think that in the long run, that's actually quite detrimental. First of all, most people can't commit that amount. And second of all, if you try to run that way long term, you will eventually try to find something in life that will give you more satisfaction than just being a pawn of a broader political game. So to that I say, how do you manage your life-work balance? I say you put the emphasis on life, because the healthier you are mentally, and the more you develop your skills outside of volunteers and activists, engagement, the more you do outside of that, not only do you make yourself a better and stronger person, you also put yourself in a better position to do good work in the future. Like, for example, just to like throw one out there, and not to say that anyone's making bad life decisions if they don't run down this way, but an 18-year-old doing volunteering for a political org, that's a good thing, powerful, helpful. But a 25-year-old with a 6-figure income doing volunteering for an org, that's even more powerful, significantly more so. The reputability, the professionalism, the life experience, the money, all of those things together mean they're capable of leveraging a lot more social power for the benefit of whatever org they do. That's why the GOP gets so far with so few on-the-ground supporters, because a lot of their supporters are ultra-wealthy people. And a lot of those suburban families who tune in, them Fox News families, are doing pretty well themselves. They're not all college students. So go for the long run. Don't burn yourself out on volunteering today and tomorrow. It's going to be a part of your life for a long time, I hope. So treat it like something that you would keep in your life for a long time.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll have our one of our other directors, Cynthia.
How has the rhetorical approach changed in the past year, and in particular around trans and LGBTQ issues?
Well, obviously, we've gone from me saying, this will lead to a genocide, to them saying this will lead to a genocide. So I feel like they're doing some of the analysis work for me, saving me some time and effort. I think that like rhetorically, it really sucks because these issues have a strong empirical basis, but the more time goes on, the less I think any of this can be resolved with a like matter-of-fact sit down on how they're empirically incorrect. I think that this gets with time more emotional. I think it gets more heated. I think that it gets more emphatic and more hyperbolic. And I think that's the game that we have to play because man, history is littered with examples of liberals smugly quoting facts at fascists who are like pulling the gas chamber knobs to the right,
You're right.
There's limits to the value of that. You can convince some people, but you need to respond in kind. And like right now, DeSantis is turning Florida into like a personal, a totalitarian state. Trump is doing speeches on the elimination of transgender people. Michael Knowles is saying just the same. These aren't situations where you can go, well, did you know factually, it's actually helpful to people. I don't think that really resonates. What you need to do is you need to be mean and you need to be aggressive and you need to be active. And you need to be mean and aggressive and active at these figures and point at other people to them and go, hey, look at this. These you guys, these your leaders, this you. I think we need to be like very aggressive in pointing out the clown makeup that they're wearing to as many people as possible. It's not about debunking what they're saying so much as it is creating a compelling argument for mockery and ridicule and pointing at them. And you can include the facts and the statistics in there. You shouldn't remove those, but it's a different rhetorical emphasis. You're not debunking Ron DeSantis. You're tearing into him. You're
Bullying.
You're making him bullying. You're making him out to be a mockery. It's critical, I think.
So Adrian would like to know, do you think social democracy is at least a good transition stage in between capitalism in its current form and socialism? Why not?
The original social democrats were socialists who understood that social democracy was just a way of using the state to prop up proletarian interests on the way to socialism. And then, because the state incorporates all which criticizes it, and so is capitalism, I guess, all those people ended up being modern day social democrats. That is to say, revisionist traitors. So, it's a good stepping stone, don't get me wrong, probably a necessary one, but man, is that a sandpit that sucks
A fall
you
from
in.
grace.
Yeah, like seriously, go back and look at like Labor Party shit back from like 120 years
They
ago.
were such
They
giga chads. Oh my
They
god.
were socialists, real socialists, not, they weren't immediate revolutionaries, but they thought they could use the power of the state to make positive changes to the system. And they did. And then they forgot they were supposed to do anything more than that. And then a lot of them stopped making positive changes to the system. So,
Well, we can hope we can live up to their name.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Ben.
Howdy.
Hi, Vaush, and hi, everybody in chat and everything. My question is, I'm a politically active person at my university. I'm in a socialist club. I talk to a lot of people on campus. And it seems like there are a lot of people that are that keep up with politics, but they just don't vote because they're so alienated, Gen Zers and all, just not voting. So do you have any tips or tricks on how I could convince people who are even interested in voting and interested in politics and know about politics, but still refuse to vote? Any advice on that?
A lot of the technical arguments I'd have in that subject probably go back to the burn or bust era, if we go back to 2000, early 2020. But in broad application, a lot of it is that young people just don't think voting is cool, and a lot of young people have fallen into that if voting could change anything, they'd make it illegal bullshit, which they have been trying to do that. Hundreds of years of this country have been fought over the right to vote and enfranchisement, and there are billions of people around the world who don't get to vote because they have authoritarian leaders. So yes, actually, it does matter, clearly. And that's such a stupid fucking phrase. Fucking Banksy. Did Banksy say that? I don't know. I hate Banksy. Fucking pretentious. You have to make it clear to them that the power the GOP has to destroy your life is directly connected to their legislative success. It is a one-to-one thing. Without the mandate of state power, the GOP has very little in the way of tools that it can use against you. Obviously, it still has a lot of cultural influence, but day to day, man, this legislative stuff matters. You see what happens. Donald Trump lost the election federally, and what do we get? We get a conservative Supreme Court justice, or not justice, justices, 3 of them. And you get Roe v. Wade revoked, kablamo, voting, You see this stuff happening all over the country. Empirically, the evidence is there. Anyone who's not a fool can look and see what the answer is. So it's an emotional bias. They don't want to be uncool. They don't want to be, one of those institutionalist types. They don't want to be seen as doing something that they feel won't matter because that's not cool if you're a kid. And I say, I don't know, you slap them around a little bit. Maybe you can give them a little 1-2. It's a stupid mentality, and a lot of it is born out of just juvenility. I think you can make the right argument. The question is whether they'll listen.